everybody, and welcome back. If you'd like to take your seats, we are going to continue with the afternoon sessions. And this first session after lunch, operationalizing the space domain. Now, as many of you know, space is no longer simply an enabler of military operations. It has become an operational domain in its own right. Virtually every modern military capability relies on assured access to space, yet that domain is becoming increasingly congested, contested, and competitive. So I'm delighted that this session, we're going to hear from General Chance Saltzman, Chief of Space Operations from the United States Space Force. And then we will go on to explore how allies are developing the capabilities, partnerships, and resilience needed to operate effectively in space, really focusing on the shared risks in space, science warfare in deterrence, and the imperative of action right now. So please do welcome General Chance Saltzman.
The raucous, soon-to-be sleepy post-lunch crowd. What an honor. Thank you so very much. It is a privilege to be back here at the Global Space and Air Chiefs Conference. Did I get that right? Where's Harv? I think Glow Spac might have a better sound to it, quite frankly. It's worth considering anyway. Look, notwithstanding, it truly is an honor to be among the distinguished group of colleagues. And you should all know that this will be my last public speech as the U.S. Space Force's Chief of Space Operations, as I plan to head into retirement next month. But thank you. It seems a little bit like applause, like get out, it's time for the next guy. It feels like, okay. I only hope that my content today can live up to the expectations of such a grand finale. So much has transpired over the last 4 years. I've struggled to really capture the right message for today, as it's difficult to focus and prioritize just the right issues for this diverse audience. And in my struggle to find coherence and substance, I received some inspiration from potentially an unlikely source, the American poet Robert Frost. I recently rediscovered one of his poems that got me thinking. However, recognizing that this international audience might not be familiar with the old American poem, I hope you will indulge me for a bit of recitation. In 1915, Frost wrote, "Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both, and be one traveler, long I stood. And I looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear. Though as for that, the passing there had worn them really about the same. And both that morning equally lay, in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day, yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference." This last line is what was most inspirational. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. Now, in my youth, I read that as sage advice that I shouldn't be afraid to travel or take the less traveled path. But now I'm older, and what I mean is I'm more experienced. And when I reread the poem, I was struck by the irony. You see, the title of the famous poem is "The Road Not Taken." The subject of the poem is the other path, not the one he took, the less traveled path, but rather the road not taken was the other path. The poem's subject, at least as the title would indicate, is about the road most traveled, the one he decided against. Now, this confused me, so I read the poem again. And then I found the lines which say, quote, "Though as for that, the passing there had worn them really about the same." What? Both the paths are worn the same. So here again, my experience kicked in. This poem is not about taking a less traveled path. It's about decision-making and being brave enough to make the decision and move forward when you're not exactly sure where that decision will lead you. And over the last 4 years, as we established the U.S. Space Force and worked tirelessly to meet the challenges of a contested space domain, I and many others have had to make countless decisions with imperfect information and uncertainty about precisely where those decisions might lead our service. What I wouldn't give in those moments to be able to see two clearly diverging paths and be faced with the simple choice of picking which one to follow. But the strategic pathways that we need to navigate remain opaque to our best capabilities in forecasting. The complexity of problem solving and proceduralizing new service while attempting to characterize modern warfare that is rapidly changing around us does not lend itself to simple path selection choices. So my thesis question today for this accomplished group of military leaders: are we bold enough to make the decisions that need to be made? Do we know which decisions must be made, right or wrong? Where is forward action more important than the path itself? On the other hand, is not making a decision a legitimate choice for us? And here it's wise, I think, to remember a very important line from Frost's poem. He writes, quote, "Knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back." Meaning, once a path is chosen, it is unlikely we will ever be back in the situation with the ability to remake the decision and choose a different path. Now, I know at this point you're like, Salty, what are you talking about? Like, this is not space, I don't understand. Forests and trees and paths, what's going on here? This sounds like an army manual more than anything else. I'm simply wondering aloud, can we see the relevant paths today? Is there a divergence or a series of divergences that we as military leaders must recognize? Do we have the courage of our convictions to make those decisions? Or is the forest too dense? Is the destination unclear? Or are the paths too numerous, causing us to hesitate? If the forest represents the modern battlefield, and our destination is a place of military advantage over our adversaries, do we even recognize the paths? Well, I contend that we should at least take the time to develop the relevant questions that will help us see the pathways. For example, have we sufficiently modernized the principles of war such that they can still guide our operational art? What does mass and maneuver look like in cyberspace? What does the high ground look like on a multi-domain battlefield? Against today's defenses, should we prioritize agility and decision speed over mass and firepower? Must we choose? Can we afford to hedge in all directions? Manned versus unmanned? Stand in or stand off? Where in warfare are we committed to artificial intelligence being used for decision making? Perhaps that's the default, in which case we must ask, where do we need to slow things down so human decision makers can still apply their judgment? What are the limits to commercial systems in warfighting? Is the world so transparent now that sanctuaries are a thing of the past? And finally, for a question more specific to the role I play, are we committed to mastering space as a warfighting domain? A warfighting domain. And now clearly, I have more questions than answers. But the first step, I believe, is to ensure we're asking the right questions, since the right answers to the wrong questions are irrelevant. We must also acknowledge that these are difficult questions to generate, and the paths that flow from any answer will be obscured. None of us will be able to effectively peer down the path far enough to find whether the path is the right one or the wrong one. And this, I think, was ultimately Frost's message. It's not the path you choose that makes the difference. It's the fact that you chose a path that makes all the difference. My takeaway is that a bias towards action is an operational imperative for us all. Consider this. Each of you may have an opinion about whether or not space is a warfighting domain. What I can tell you with some degree of certainty and with all due respect, your opinion doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter any more so than me opining that air is not a warfighting domain. Even amateur observations of the modern battlefield indicate that these are warfighting domains because it is clear that both air and space provide military utility. And as we all know, fundamentally, battles are one side taking military actions and the other side trying to deny them, and vice versa. Wherever these armed contests between military activities occur, that's a warfighting domain. The modern battlefield, with all its warfighting domains, creates the conditions that present us with various paths to reach our objective. To get to our destination, we must navigate the forest, and therefore we must choose a path. So feel free to form your own opinion about the forest. But regardless of our opinion of the modern battlefield, we are charged with determining a path to arrive at military advantage. We must frame our choices around how best to gain military advantage. And for better or worse, the path we choose will make all the difference. Now, as you can tell, coming to the end of my military career has made me somewhat reflective. So if you'll indulge me, I'd like to spend my final remaining minutes describing a few of my reflections more broadly. Some of you have likely heard these before, but others perhaps not. First, in the hyper-political environment we find ourselves, with partisan politics creating divisions between a multitude of stakeholders, I remind myself that military institutions in our democracies, particularly military leadership, serves as the ballast in the ship. While it may feel like the ballast slows progress as the ship of state attempts to quickly move towards its goals, the ballast creates stability when the inevitable storms arise. And we as military leaders in our democracies must remember our roles, think long-term, offer our military experience to decision makers, and do what we can to provide the stability and be a calming presence. Second, we are stronger as a team of nations than any one of us is individually. There is far too much evidence over the last 80 years or so to argue otherwise. In my experience, the team is strongest when its members have routine and continual interaction. I've never been a fan of all-star teams. Bringing the best individuals together and assuming they will perform well as a team is a flawed assumption. Teamwork is built over time. It requires trust, commitment, mutual understanding, forged through ongoing interaction. I believe space is the ultimate team sport because the orbits that we rely on do not adhere to national boundaries. And while each of us looks up from our specific parts of the globe and can individually characterize part of the space domain, together we can cover far more. And God forbid, if the conflict extends into space, none of us will be able to avoid the war zone. Unlike a combat zone on air, land, or sea, we will not be able to steer clear. Whether we want to be in the combat zone or not, orbital mechanics will put all of our space capabilities in a space war zone. We will share the consequences, therefore we should share the responsibility for safe, secure, and stable space domain. Third, these widespread consequences of conflict in space should make deterrence the goal for all of us. To avoid a war when possible is a common objective I have observed from every military leader I've ever encountered. We all know firsthand the consequences, and we, more than any other group, want to avoid it. And it's my opinion that the best way to deter a war is to prepare for one. But as those who have heard my keynote here 2 years ago, you may remember that I believe the military leaders have a unique responsibility with regards to deterring conflict. And here I mean a broader use of deterrence beyond nuclear war, conventional deterrence, if you will. In my estimation, we should focus on the science of warfare, not the political art of deterrence. Because deterrence, as we know, plays out in the mind of an adversary. It involves a decision calculus where costs and benefits are measured. But these measurements are imprecise, and assessing how to best deter involves unknowns that make it difficult to plan for. Consider this. If asked to deter a missile attack, we would have to make the adversary believe the costs of an attack outweigh the benefits. So we'd need to know a few things to create those conditions. What does the adversary hold dear? What is the adversary willing to suffer? How is the adversary motivated? Is the adversary driven by fear, honor, national interests? The answer to these questions are necessary to properly deter and nearly impossible to determine objectively. On the other hand, what if instead of deter, we were asked to defend against a missile attack? Now here, the science of war has more objective answers. How many missiles? What are their ranges? Where will they launch from? What are the most likely targets? And as military strategists and leaders, we should focus on this aspect of national security. Be ready to defend, if necessary, even disrupt, degrade, and destroy. If we have the capabilities to do this, it will be seen as a combat-credible force, which should create a deterrent effect. And if it doesn't, we will be prepared to effectively respond to the aggression. Lastly, I've come to appreciate that not all challenges must be solved. Some challenges should simply be managed. Some of the challenges we face are so complex and require extraordinary effort, focus, and resources to solve. The most frustrating of these often tantalize us with seemingly reasonable fix actions, but inevitably those actions come up short and we extend the problem. There are many reasons for this, but my experience leads me to conclude that managing these challenges to reduce their near-term impact is probably as good as it gets. Effective interoperability between the systems across all our nations. Worthy effort? Unlikely we will comprehensively do this. Classification levels that don't interfere with combined operations. Worthy effort. We are unlikely to solve that completely. Weapon system acquisitions at operationally relevant speed. Worthy effort. At the pace of the operations that I'm seeing, we are unlikely to solve this once and for all. Now, don't misunderstand me. We must continue to press hard to mitigate these challenges. Continued enhancement in these areas will always make us better. However, as senior leaders, we must acknowledge that the multitude of very dynamic variables means these will be enduring challenges, and we must set expectations with our national leaders. A healthy respect for the complexities of these types of issues will serve everyone's interest in the long term. Setting long-term interest, enduring goals, stable resourcing, continuous R&D efforts, rather than quick fixes that promise much but deliver little. The number of years of military experience in this room is impressive. We must all commit to using the credibility that comes from that experience to provide realistic expectations, stabilize decision-making processes, strengthen our partnerships, and focus on our unique roles in deterrence. And after 35 years of reflection, I believe this is the best contribution that we can make to international peace and stability. In conclusion, I would be remiss if I didn't let you all know how much I appreciate the friendship, collaboration, and mentorship I received from this group. I appreciate how tolerant this group of mostly pilots has been with the space guy. I have committed myself and the U.S. Space Force to assisting our international partners in their development of space capabilities and expertise. I believe we have ingrained that mindset in our young service and have developed the institutional processes to continue to enhance our collective space community. And as I shift my focus to the next chapter of life, please know that I will be cheering you all on from the sidelines, and I remain at your beck and call if I can ever be of assistance. Thank you. Semper Supra.